So if you Ross and Neil are happy to give, oh, Neil's the other Neil Ingram's disappeared. Hang on a minute. Okay, Neil's back. So if you could give us a quick update, and then if there's any questions afterwards, that would be cool.
Okay. Ross, I don't know if you want to, do you want to give an update just on the EIA process and where we are?
Yeah, I can do. I suppose just where we were getting towards where we were approaching at the time of the last consultation events, we've now completed all the outstanding site work and investigations and studies on site, and have now what we refer to as frozen the design. So the design that we're now working with just now will pretty much be what's presented in the planning application, which we expect to submit in the first quarter of next year. So the work that's currently ongoing just now by various technical environmental specialists at Arcus, Open, who are a landscape architect, and MacArthur Green, who are looking after ecology, ornithology, and some of the peatwork side of things. They are working their way through their environmental assessments just now. So having collated all their baseline data, they'll move on to assessing each of their own technical areas, drafting up all their technical appendices, and pulling together the individual chapters of the EIA report, which will subsequently go through a internal review process, obviously be reviewed by the client, etc., as well, before that's submitted to the ECU, the Energy Consents Unit of the Scottish Government, at which point the statutory consultees and members of the public will be invited to comment on the application as it's presented. So yeah, in terms of physical, anything to show for what's been going on over the last couple of months? Not too much, but yeah, that's what the team's been up to. I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that, Neil, or anything specific. I don't think there's not really anything that's from an environmental perspective that we didn't know a couple of months ago. The site's sort of not thrown up any particular surprises since then. So
no, I think we're at, I'm not sure if we were at 22 turbines or 21 turbines when we were out doing the exhibitions.
Yeah, I can't remember now. I've got a feeling it might have still been
22, but where the frozen layout's 21 turbines. So that's where we're at. Just briefly to touch on I know the issue was raised a number of times by a number of different people across both of the exhibitions regarding the access coming in from Clyde North rather than coming down from the sort of bigger side of the site. We had a good discussion with SSE last week, and have another intending to have a sit down face-to-face meeting to just get some of the details finalized, hopefully in January, but that's all going to be COVID dependent. We, between both ourselves and SSE, we would be surprised if the deal was agreed before we submit the planning application. So it is likely the planning application will go in with both track options in it. The hope would be that during the consultation period, we'd be able to delete the northern section of track. The environmental statement will show that clearly, will show the tracks which would be deleted, assuming we get the deal with SSE concluded. I don't think either ourselves or SSE believe that there is a likelihood that won't happen. So we're progressing with the anticipation that deal will be done. We think that, and it was reassuring to have the comments from some of the directors in SSE just saying the same thing. So hopefully that will be something that works its way through the system in the first half of next year. SSE are very big and wheels turn very slowly, but nobody sees any particular issues, and they have done similar deals to this on other schemes. So that's being used, if you like, as a template to get this one done.
So does anyone have any questions that they want to pitch in on at the moment?
I was just wondering what, facilities for access for like joggers and things would be around the turbines, because I gather there are one or two wind farms that have become a nice activity place for people.
Well, the access to the site will basically be as it is just now, public access, freely available, except for during construction periods. There'll obviously be sections of the site which would be closed off just for health and safety purposes. But in terms of recreation, the intention will be that the tracks would be there and available for anybody to walk on. Just as the land and the tracks that exist currently are.
I don't think. I mean, I'm not sure if your question is specifically on will there be, specific visitor centre or something like similar to Whiteley. I don't think there's any intention to have something like that. But as Ross says, informal access, which is already possible in the sites, would be maintained other than during the construction period.
Yeah, and will they be signposted?
I'm not. I think on all wind farms there's signage because, for example, if there's a turbine has a problem, any engineer coming to the site needs to know how to get to that turbine. So every single wind farm I've been at has a map at the start of it, and then at every junction there's signposts, if you like, saying which turbines are in which direction, so that in the event that people who are not familiar with the site have to go to, let's say, turbine 7, they're able to find it quickly. And I think that's also a requirement for emergency services. If heaven forfend, there was an incident at one of the turbines, then the likes of an ambulance would need to know where it's going to.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I can see, a lot of upsides to not having the northern access track and going in through Clyde. The downside is that there wouldn't be recreational access from the north either. But I don't know, some people, there's mixed feelings about that in the sort of Cooter Lamington area, about more people going through the villages to access the site. But, from a bigger point of view, I guess more recreational access to the area and better parking, say at Cooter Allers or at Cooter Reservoir, would be a bonus. But that's less likely to happen if you're not constructing tracks from that direction anyway. But yeah.
I think. I mean, we appreciate that. I think though the majority of the feedback, and indeed we had an interesting discussion with David Mundell. Is he MP or MSP for the area?
MP, sadly, yeah.
So he was very keen that we use existing infrastructure. I think somebody had been in touch with him concerned about the use of the access tracks coming down from the north. And he was actually, it was a fairly useful discussion, but he was actually offering his services if we needed somebody to lean on SSE to try and get them to the negotiating table. But he saw an advantage to using tracks which are already there. I think the council and Scottish Natural Heritage, or Nature Scot as they're called now, are also keen to see existing infrastructure used. And that would be our intention as well. But having said all that, we haven't signed the deal with SSE, and until it's signed, there's still a possibility that northern route will happen. We've maintained it in the planning application to give ourselves effectively leverage with SSE. We know that that route is deliverable and turbines can be transported to the site using it. If we were to go in without a deal with SSE concluded and without an alternative option, we leave ourselves very vulnerable to taking whatever deal they would feel they wanted to offer us, rather than being in a proper kind of sensible negotiation with them. Hopefully that clarifies. I know some people were concerned at one of the public exhibitions. I think it was the second one. Some people thought we were just, it was just a ruse, that we didn't really have any intention of coming in via the south using the existing access, but it's fully our intention that we would do that, because all the feedback almost all the feedback we've had has been a preference to use an access track which already exists.
And when you had the exhibition, you said that you were still in the process of doing your peat survey. Is that done now? And what does that include?
There's a wee tiny bit of peat around, is it turbine 16, Ross?
Yeah, it's over on the eastern side of the site.
Yeah. But there was no additional peat found. Basically, we already knew that there was a wee bit of peat there, but the site's remarkably peat free, and surprisingly peat free given where it is. Well, say we've avoided all the areas bar one. There's a wee bit of peat at that one location. The rest of the peat on the site has been avoided through the EIA process. That's the whole purpose of carrying out the studies, so that you can identify the constraints on site and avoid them. And that has been achieved through the design.
Thanks. Neil, you had your hand up.
In terms of the alternative access roads, clearly the incentive for using an existing access road is that you get away from major disturbance of the hillside with creating this access track. But what you then lose is the fact that the creation of that track does provide better access, given that the road has to then is then there for use. There was some talk at one of the previous meetings I was at about planting of deciduous woodlands on the slope above Lamington and improving the paths up from Lamington to the site. Is that still the intention of the landowner?
If it was the landowner you were speaking to and that was his intention, then I imagine it's still his intention. We haven't, that's not something that has been discussed in detail as part of the development. But if it was the landowner saying that, I know that there were plans to forest some of the site. I know Justin Maxwell Stewart had plans to do that. So I imagine those are still extant, and I don't think there's been any change in that. Certainly I'm not aware of it, and the plans were in to plant forestry to increase the amount of deciduous woodland in his land holding.
Yeah, just to add to that, what Neil's saying there, that if that's the case, then we would.
Can't hear you.
Oh, sorry.
You've gone very faint.
I have, sorry.
That's better.
All right, okay, sorry. I was just saying that that is obviously something separate to the application for the wind farm. So that won't form part of our application. But what will be included within the application that's part of the work that's ongoing just now is the habitat management plan, which will detail any habitat improvements in areas for specific management within the red line boundary. But the type of woodland that was previously being discussed, I don't think it's unlikely that would form part of that management plan, just given the nature of what was being proposed and the sort of key habitats being identified by the ecologist on site.
Can I just ask about the balance between the landowner and the wind farm company? on, like, the landowner is responsible for the land and how it's used. Is that?
The landowner,
The landowner and the wind farm company are one and the same. Well, there's two landowners, and they are also the developers of the wind farm. So it's not a separate company. It's not. We're not. You know, the landowners aren't working with Scottish Power or SSE. Working with SSE, hopefully in the access, but not as part of the wind farm development. So the two landowners are the developer, if you like.
Yeah. So could it be put into their contract that they develop the habitat and the forests and could that be included in their?
Well, if the wind farm's consented, there usually is consented with a list of planning conditions. And one of the planning conditions usually is around habitat management. And the habitat management plan often specifies areas that are to be, you know, planted with forestry, and it'll specify the type of forestry and so on. So if that is the case in this wind farm, which we'd fully expect, then the landowners, in order to build the wind farm, you have to discharge the planning conditions. So that would be, they would be bound to do that as part of the development.
Yeah. So who tells them? Who sets this out?
it's quite tricky. Sorry, Niall, can I just, because the development is a fairly limited part of the two estates, certainly in terms of Kingsbeck estate. So there's very little any planners can do about improvements, be it access or otherwise, to the wider estates. That would purely be between the landowners and the community, and almost, you know, so it's so the planners and SNH and other consultative bodies can make recommendations for the area more or less immediately around and impacted by the development, is my understanding. But they won't be making many recommendations for the wider area, which is probably where most people have an interest. Sorry, no.
Sometimes you do get you know, enhancement off-site, but it tends to be close to the site. It wouldn't be, you know, 3 or 4 miles away. It would be, you know, a mile away or something, usually within the landowner's landholding, because you can't really ask the developer to control land which is not within their control. So that tends to be what happens, that any habitat management work is done quite close to where the wind farm is. I'm not sure if that answers your question.
No, the other thing, and I'm pretty ignorant about this, but what is the height of the blade? How high is
the maximum tip height? Would be 200 meters to the tip of the blade whenever it's in a vertical position. So whenever the blade is facing straight up in the air, it would be a maximum of 200 meters. Now it could be less, but it won't be more. And the turbine, nobody knows at this point in time, well, first of all, if the scheme's going to get the go ahead, but also what turbine that you would build. So there's a number of turbine manufacturers, and if the scheme were consented, then you generally go to, you know, no more than 5 manufacturers. It's usually 3, and invite them to put their best bid forward for what turbine they think would be most appropriate on that site, given the planning consent which is available. So that's obviously a long way down the line, but that's the process in the future.
And I assume that there is a height above ground, which is
the height, that's the height above ground.
Above a certain height. What's that height?
That's 200 meters above the ground. You would also,
That's the lowest, the lowest point the blade goes to.
Oh, no, the lowest point the blade goes to wouldn't be specified.
Well, presumably it'll be safe.
Oh yeah. You actually want to keep your lower blade as far away from the ground as you can, because the closer you get to the ground, the dirtier the air is, if you like. So the air, as you get closer to the ground, the air is much rougher, more turbulent, just because of the interference between the air and the ground. So it's all turbine manufacturers want to keep the lower tip height as high from the ground as possible. Where you have these turbines that look a wee bit dumpy, where they've put a long blade on a relatively short tower. I mean, we're talking, it still have maybe 30, 35 meters clearance, but that is more problematic the closer you get to the ground, because you start to get differential stresses across your turbine. So the tip of the turbine's in nice, clean, fast air, bottom of the turbine's in dirty, turbulent, slow air, and that gives you a lot of wear and tear basically on the components of the turbine, which means that your maintenance regime may have to be increased, which adds to your cost. So all these things are taken into account whenever you're selecting the turbine. But absolutely, it's not, you're not in any danger of getting a scalp from the bottom of the blade as it comes round.
A bit more to that again, and Neil, correct me if my turbine maths is wrong here, but for the what we assess things in the EIA against, we choose what we refer to as a candidate turbine. As Neil says, the final turbine that may get built on site would be subject to that competitive tender process. But the one we're looking at for the site is called the Vestas V150. And that maximum tip height is 200, as we're saying, and we're looking at a rotor diameter of 150 meters. So if I've calculated this correctly, Neil, does that not mean that the lowest point that the blade will be 50 meters above the ground level?
Meters above the ground, yeah.
Yeah. But then if you have a forestation development underneath, that will cause more turbulence. It cuts the 50 meters down to, I don't know, what's the height of a tree?
About 15 to 20. But that you would have to be right up in the very top of that tree. Swaying back and forward. There's no forestry.
No, I'm not talking about me. I'm talking about a person. I'm not talking about people. I'm talking about with the tree then cause more turbulence with them.
Yeah, trees basically steal the wind. I mean, whenever you see a tree swaying back and forward in the wind, it's basically taking energy from the wind. Now, if that tree wasn't there, that energy could be going into the wind turbine. So you don't really want to be having your turbines in forest which is mature. Sometimes you'll have forestry which is replanted in the life of the wind farm, and by the time the timber's ready for harvesting, it doesn't really, the growth period, the life cycle of a bit of commercial forestry is usually somewhere around 30 to 50 years. So that's beyond the lifespan of the wind farm. But I can appreciate what you're saying, and it's absolutely right that you would have to take into account forestry. And one of the things that the turbine manufacturers, if you're going out to tender, having secured a consent, one of the things they want to see is a forest design plan, so that they know what forestry is on site, when it's due to be harvested, and at what age it's due to be harvested, so they can work out what the impact of that forestry would be on their machines.
It has to be said, Katie, that the turbines are all going on the very tops of the high ridges around Cowgill Reservoir on pretty thin soil, so that they're not appropriate sites for putting in productive forestry at that level and right on the tops anyway. And if it was natural woodland that was going in, it would really be scrub. It would be nothing like tall trees, I would think.
No, that's helpful. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for answering my questions.
Roger, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I put the wrong one up. Yeah, I was just checking, obviously you're going there because of the wind, but is there any danger of too much wind blowing things down? I know there's plenty of turbines around and none seem to have fallen over. But, we do get
a couple, to be honest, a couple have fallen over. I mean, I'm not one to pretend that there have never been any incidents with turbines. What has happened a couple of places in Scotland is there's been a problem with the turbine, and you've had an overspeed problem where the control mechanism hasn't worked right, and the blade has actually clipped the tower. And because the tower is a tube and is strong as long as its its integrity is not affected, even though the blade's only comparatively light, usually made of fiberglass or something similar. When it clips the tower, it causes the tower to fall over in the same way that if you're standing on the top of it, I don't know if you did this as a youngster, and you stood on the top of an empty Coke can and touched the side of it with it's able to take your weight while you're just burned out. But as soon as you touch the side of it with your other foot, it just collapses. And that has happened. I can think of 2 turbines where that has happened in Scotland. It's unusual, and it's not due to too much wind. I mean, the turbines are actually. I have a good friend who's working putting these turbines up in Vietnam at the minute, and they are their classification is actually got a wee T beside it because it's designed to withstand typhoons. So wind speeds of sort of 170, 180 miles an hour, which is something we haven't seen in Scotland. They'll comfortably run through 100-mile-an-hour winds without any bother. What you usually do, you could keep generating at high wind speeds, but again, the higher wind speeds tend to put more stress on the turbine components. So if you were running, at wind speeds of over 60 miles an hour, you would have to have a more frequent maintenance regime. So what happens is that whenever you get to, usually it's just shy of 60 miles an hour, the turbines are shut down, the blades are feathered so they don't catch the wind, and the permanent brake put on, and it just sits there as the wind howls around it. And then once the wind dies down again, it's brought back into production. But you're talking, on most sites, less than 1% a year of time that's shut down due to high wind speeds. You do see turbines shut down and individual turbines shut down, and quite often we get asked, why are those turbines not running? It's windy enough. Usually the reason for that is because there's not capacity in the grid to take the power. So that's one of the things that National Grid are looking at in terms of trying to reinforce the grid network as we move towards electrification of everything. The grid network needs to be stronger to supply more electricity, because I think it's the overarching ideal is that everything's going to be electric, from cars to heating to everything else.
Talking about storage.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Jim Stevenson, any questions?
Sorry to be arriving late this evening, folks. So I'm sure I've missed a third of the discussion. So any changes or any agreements with the access rights or connection to the National Grid positions? Has that been discussed already?
We had a brief chat about the access, just saying that we had another good discussion with SSE last week, and hoping to have a sit-down discussion just to thrash through some things in January. Neither ourselves nor SSE believe that there's any reason why a deal won't be done. So we're expecting that to be done, but neither party believes that the deal will be done before the application is submitted. So the application will be submitted with both options, with an intention to delete the northern option as we progress through the determination period. We've had a discussion with the council and the Energy Consent Unit about this, and they both recognise and understand the reasons behind that, and understand how the mechanisms by which that can be done through the process. In terms of
at the moment, you're kind of quite quietly confident, are you, at pulling off a deal?
Yeah, I think both ourselves and SSE have said there's nothing here that's too difficult. It comes down just to agreeing let's not beat about the bush, the financial mechanism to compensate everybody for the use of the track. So, and that's expected. It was one of the things they said on the call last week was that they've a template from another scheme where they've done exactly the same thing. So they would anticipate just using that template to get this deal over the line. So that was very encouraging from my perspective, that you're not having to start from scratch, if you like. You're starting from a position where there's already a lot of the issues have been agreed between two parties, and you're just trying to iron out the bits and pieces that would be specific to your own individual circumstances.
Any more questions, Graham W. or Leslie? None from Leslie. Graham.
Sorry, I've just joined in. I didn't realise, a bit late to the party here, but no questions from me.
Right. If you want a recording of the meeting, we're recording it, so we can, if you contact the biggercc@gmail.com account, we can send you.
Malcolm keeps raising his hand.
Yes, I was just going to ask quickly. I mean, I know it's not really for Marcus, but has there been any movement on the nature of the associated community benefit schemes?
Sorry, no, the agreement to facilitate investment is still a work in progress.
Yeah.
And John's leading that, and I think he's very aware that he needs to devote a bit more time to it. So that's something that is moving towards the top of his to-do list in terms of the wind farm.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
If there's nothing else, I think it's just to say thank you to Neil and Ross for coming along and asking questions that people had. I think there's a mixture of people here tonight from Biggar Community Council, Coota Community Council, and well, not Coota, Dunedin, sorry, Dunedin Community Council, which includes Coota, and just some members of the public as well. So thanks for answering the questions. And I guess if anyone does come up with any questions after you've finished, can people email you or something?
Absolutely. I was just going to say that. Thank you very much for having us along. And if there are any questions, or if people have, you know, on reflection or on thinking about things, have got some more things they want clarified or questions they want to ask, don't hesitate to get in touch. You know, we may not be able to answer all the questions right away, but we'll certainly will be open and honest as we have been. And yeah, do get in touch with anything at all.
Thank you. And yes, just in terms of timescale, so you're talking about planning application in January-ish, and then I guess it would be what, 3 months or so to get a determination?
No, it'll be the application. I think we're looking at Q1. Things have been delayed a wee bit, so I don't think it's going to be going in January. I think it's more likely to be late February, early March. In terms of the determination, realistically, you're looking at least a year.
Okay.
You might get the local council coming back in maybe 6 to 9 months, depending. If you get a result back from the Scottish Government within a year of application, that's very good going. You'd be more likely to be looking at something like 18 months or that sort of order. It depends a little bit on how complicated the application is. We believe that this application in the big scheme of things is relatively straightforward. The site's adjacent to an operational wind farm, so you know, a lot of the generic wind farm issues would already have been addressed through the Clyde process. There's some specifics that we need to sort out. There'll be an impact in that the turbines would be potentially visible to the radar at Glasgow Airport and at Prestwick Airport. So there's agreements that'll have to be concluded with them, but those are kind of standard things now, which can be addressed through radar mitigation. There's also a program of replacing most of the radars at commercial airports in Scotland with radar which can more effectively blank out turbines. So we're not concerned about that. It's basically going to be a cost to the project. So there's nothing in particular. at this site, which should slow things down. Hopefully we'll get the agreement with SSE concluded quickly, and then the access looks a lot more straightforward, a lot more or a lot less contentious, if you like. So, and you're using existing assets. Yeah, it's a fairly clean site. There's no designated land on or near the site, and no designated species on or near the site. So in those terms, it's a cleanish application compared to, there's another site I'm working on that's adjacent to a special protection area for birds. So you can imagine that would be a lot more sensitive ornithologically than the likes of Clyde or Grayside.
Can I just ask Neil, on that topic of turbine height? These particular rollers are significantly higher than the ones that are in the Clyde wind farm. Is that right? By an extra sort of 20 or 30 meters higher. Is that right?
I think it's even more than that. Ross, do you know off the top of your head?
Top of my head, I don't know, but yeah, 30 might be close to how much bigger they are than the original Clyde turbines. But then I think the extension ones were slightly taller than the originals, but still shorter.
But they are taller. Yes, they are definitely taller.
Now I'm only wondering about the warning red lights that will be mounted on them for aircraft and aviation. So will there be warning lights on the top of all the masts, or just a selected, the highest ones in the area, and are they switched on 24/7, or will they be on just after official dusk?
Yeah, so this is an area that the Scottish Government as well is quite interested in, because they're keen that there aren't lit structures all over the country. Now, there's a mandatory lighting for any structure that's above 150 meters, and whenever you get closer to airports, that comes down a lot lower as you get into the flight path. Now, these turbines, as it stands at the minute, yes, they would all require to be lit. We would expect during negotiation to be able to reduce the number to hopefully, the perimeter. Now, it's an odd shaped site, so there'll be some debate about what constitutes the perimeter, or the cardinal, the most northerly, most southerly, most easterly, most westerly. We're also looking at the least bright light that we can put on the turbines, and hopefully have it shrouded so it's only pointing upwards. There's also work ongoing to have lights which are only switched on whenever there's an aeroplane within the vicinity of the turbines, and that's something that the government's quite interested in, because aeroplanes now are soon all going to have transponders, and the turbines would only be lit when they get a ping basically from the airplane transponder. So these are all things which
that would make a big difference.
Yeah, these are all things which should reduce the amount of time that there would be a red light shown. As part of the environmental impact assessment, though, we do have to assess that the turbines would be lit, and as a worst case scenario, we assume that all the turbines will be lit. So that's what the assumption is in the environmental statement, and the landscape architects are out and have to do nighttime assessments of that.
Yeah.
We're also, Ross mentioned a couple of the consultancies, the likes of MacArthur Green, who are doing some of the work for the ecology and ornithology, and Open, who are doing the landscape work. We also have a specialist aviation consultant called Cirrus, who are working with us on the radar and lighting issues to try and get those reduced to as low as possible. And ideally, yes, they would only be lit whenever there's an airplane in the area, and the lights would be shrouded so that they're only facing upwards.
Okay, thanks for that, Neil.
Okay, if there's no other questions, then just thank you very much. Have a very good Christmas, and hopefully steer clear of COVID, and we'll hear more from you in the new year.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks very much again, and have a very good Christmas yourselves.
Bye.
Thanks for organising that, Janet. Nice to see you. Thank you.
Thanks now. Yeah, bye-bye.
Bye now.